The 70s and 80s, a world before smartphones, streaming, and Wi-Fi. Back then, life moved slower, and the things we took for granted would leave today's kids completely baffled. From dial-up phones to Saturday trips to the video rental store, it was a different kind of childhood, and maybe a better one. In this video, we're looking at 10 everyday parts of life from the 70s and 80s that modern kids just wouldn't understand. If even one of these brings back a memory, hit subscribe, and let's rewind. Before streaming, before DVDs, there was the mighty VHS tape and the weekly pilgrimage to the video rental shop. You'd walk in, greeted by the smell of plastic cases and popcorn from the counter, scanning shelves lined with colorful covers. Choosing a film was an event. You'd pick up the box, read the blurb on the back, and hope the copy you wanted wasn't already rented out. Sometimes you'd settle for second choice just because the top pick was gone. At home, you had to rewind the tape after watching, a courtesy drilled into every renter. And if you forgot, the store clerk would frown, or worse, charge a fee. The picture wasn't perfect, the sound sometimes hissed, but none of that mattered. Friday night meant a stack of tapes, snacks on the coffee table, and the thrill of having a movie night without leaving your living room. In the 70s and 80s, making a phone call was a slower, more deliberate act. You'd lift the heavy receiver, hear the steady dial tone, and spin the rotary dial one number at a time, waiting for it to click back before moving to the next. If you made a mistake on the last digit, you started all over again. There was no backspace, no saved contacts, just numbers memorized or scribbled in an address book. The phone was usually fixed to one spot in the house, often in the hallway or kitchen, with a cord that limited how far you could wander during a call. For privacy, you'd stretch it as far as it would go, ducking around a corner to avoid eavesdropping. Today's kids can't imagine a world without instant calls, texts, and video chats. Back then, phoning a friend meant time, patience, and the satisfying click-clack rhythm of the dial. In the 70s and 80s, taking a photo wasn't instant. It was an act of faith. You'd load a roll of film with 24 or 36 precious exposures, carefully winding it into place before snapping the first shot. Every click counted. There was no deleting a bad photo or checking if someone blinked. You wouldn't know how it turned out until the entire roll was finished and developed. Developing meant a trip to the chemist or a photo lab, handing over the little canister and waiting days, sometimes a week, for the prints to come back. Opening that envelope was like unwrapping a gift. Some photos perfect, others blurry, overexposed, or missing half a head. Today, with smartphones storing thousands of shots, the idea of rationing your photos seems absurd. But back then, each picture felt special and worth the wait. In the 70s and 80s, music lived in your hands, on vinyl records and cassette tapes, played through towering hi-fi systems with more buttons and knobs than you dared touch. Cassettes were portable magic. You could make your own mixtapes, record songs off the radio, trying to cut out the DJ's voice, and swap tapes with friends. But they came with quirks, hissy sound, tangled tape, and the eternal need to rewind, often with the help of a pencil. A good hi-fi setup was a source of pride, taking up an entire corner of the living room. 2 giant speakers, an amplifier, a tuner, maybe even a double cassette deck for high-tech copying. Today's kids can stream millions of songs instantly, but they'll never know the joy of pressing record at just the right moment, or the heartbreak of hearing your favorite tape get chewed up by the player. In the 70s and 80s, television choice was limited. Most homes in the UK had just 3 channels at first: BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, with Channel 4 joining the lineup in 1982. There was no on-demand, no catch-up, no recording unless you had a pricey video recorder. If you missed your show, you missed it, and you'd have to wait months, maybe years, for a repeat. Programs didn't run 24/7 either. After the late-night news, the screen went to static or showed the iconic test card, sometimes accompanied by soft music. Families planned evenings around the TV guide. Everyone watched the same shows at the same time, so playground chats the next day were full of last night's plot twists. Today's endless streaming makes that world feel impossibly slow. But back then, those few channels brought the whole country together in front of the screen. In the 70s and 80s, kids had a freedom that feels almost impossible today. You'd head out in the morning with a bike, a football, or just a bit of pocket change, and only return when the streetlights flickered on. Parents didn't track your every move. They trusted you'd be fine as long as you made it back for tea. The neighborhood was your playground. Parks, empty lots, woods and back gardens all became part of the adventure. Games were made up on the spot. British Bulldog, hide and seek, curbsy, and disputes were settled without adults stepping in. A scraped knee or a muddy jumper was a badge of honor, not a reason to stop playing. Today's world of scheduled playdates and constant supervision makes that kind of unstructured, all-day freedom almost unthinkable. But for kids of the 70s and 80s, it was just another day of growing up. In the 70s and 80s, finding information meant opening a book, often a heavy, leather-bound encyclopedia that took up an entire shelf. Families who could afford it proudly displayed full sets at home, and for school projects, they were gold. If the answer wasn't there, you headed to the library. Armed with a pencil and notebook, you'd search through card catalogs, long drawers filled with index cards, to track down the right book. Sometimes the information you needed was in a massive reference volume you couldn't even check out, so you'd copy it by hand. There was no search bar, no instant results, and certainly no cut and paste. Research took time, patience, and a bit of detective work. Today's kids can pull up answers in seconds, but they'll never know the satisfaction of finding exactly what you needed after hours of flipping pages and feeling like you'd earned it. In the late 70s and early 80s, home video gaming was still a novelty, and Atari was at the center of it. The chunky black console, wood grain panel, and simple joystick with a single red button became symbols of a new kind of entertainment. Games came on cartridges you had to blow into if they didn't load properly. Whether that actually helped or not, graphics were blocky, sound effects were beeps and bloops, and yet they sparked hours of excitement. You'd sit cross-legged in front of the TV, guiding a square ball in Pong, or dodging pixelated aliens in Space Invaders. Two-player mode meant huddling together, elbows bumping as you battled for high scores. Today's kids, raised on ultra-realistic graphics and online multiplayer, might laugh at the simplicity. But for us, those early games were pure magic, proof that the future had arrived in our living rooms. Before cassettes took over, serious music lovers and audio enthusiasts swore by reel-to-reel tape recorders. These machines looked more like lab equipment than home electronics, with two large, spinning reels and a maze of buttons and dials. Sound quality was warm and rich, far beyond what early cassette decks could manage. Recording meant carefully threading the tape through the machine, making sure it ran smoothly over the heads before hitting record. Families used them to capture everything from favorite albums to homemade radio shows, and even special events like weddings or children's voices. But they weren't exactly portable. These were heavy, stay-at-home devices. By the mid-80s, reel-to-reel had mostly disappeared from living rooms. replaced by smaller, easier formats. Today, most kids have never even seen one in person and wouldn't know where to start if they did. In the 70s and 80s, the day's news didn't come from a phone in your pocket. It landed on your doorstep. Morning newspapers were a daily ritual, rustling open over breakfast, the smell of fresh ink mixing with tea or coffee. The paper was where you got everything: headlines, classifieds, sports scores, and the weather. For TV, you relied on the printed listings, either in the newspaper or in a dedicated TV guide magazine, to plan your viewing for the week. If you missed the evening news broadcast, you waited until the next day for updates. And if a program wasn't in the guide, you didn't watch it. Simple as that. Today's instant notifications and endless on-demand content have made that world feel ancient. But back then, the thump of the morning paper on the doormat was how the day officially began.